going completely dark was the only thing that I could think to do. And for the last 3 years, I've just hidden behind the scandal. Now I can't get out from behind it.
Yeah, because it's a big step to like sit down and do what we're doing and to talk about it.
Right. But even like going out in public with like my kids or just going out to dinner or something like that, I feel like the only thing that people see is the scandal. And you looked over at me with this look on your face, and it was like the veil just fell, like this. You know, like I knew in my brain that something was going on, but I just sort of refused to believe it. And then when I saw that, like, just wildly guilty look on your face, like you wanted to tell me something.
You guys, we have to talk about Ned Fulmer again, because he genuinely will not stop talking about the cheating scandal, and at this point, it feels like there's basically nothing he won't do in order to keep content coming, even if it means embarrassing himself and his family all over again in the process. After almost a month of silence on his channel, Ned came back with a full stand-up comedy set built almost entirely around jokes about how his marriage and career fell apart. Not one joke about it in passing, several, repeated throughout the same set, hitting the same beats over and over. I used to be famous at BuzzFeed for trying new things. Then I cheated on my wife. Turns out that was the one thing I really shouldn't have tried new. That line, or some close variation of it, showed up multiple separate times across the same video, like it was the anchor joke he kept returning to. Now, I get the argument he's making underneath it, that humor can genuinely be a coping mechanism, and there's real truth to that idea. People process pain through comedy all the time, and being honest and open about a struggle instead of hiding it away can genuinely help other people going through something similar to what you went through. Humor that comes from a place of walking around with your pain in a way you actually have control over can mean a lot to people facing similar situations. I don't disagree with any of that in general, as a concept, but this isn't a situation that only affected Ned personally. It affected his now ex-wife Ariel, his kids, the other couple involved, his former co-workers, and an audience that increasingly feels like they're being pulled back into someone else's pain over and over again just because it makes for good content. That's the actual issue people have with this. Not that he's processing something genuinely hard, which is understandable, but that he keeps choosing to process it publicly, on repeat, in front of an audience that never signed up to keep reliving it alongside him. And he hasn't slowed down since that stand-up video got real backlash either. He keeps finding new ways to work the scandal back into whatever he's posting, including on his own podcast, where he'll regularly ask guests, often actual professionals in relevant fields, for advice on his specific situation. Which, fine, if he genuinely wants to learn something useful from it, or help other people who've been through something similar, that's at least a defensible goal on its own terms. But it's happened often enough at this point that it starts to feel less like genuine reflection and more like a recurring bit he keeps returning to because it's reliable content. In one recent episode, a guest flat out told him that at some point you actually do have to move forward, that his kids don't benefit at all from him holding on to that past betrayal and hurt, and that if a perfect relationship with an ex isn't realistically possible anymore, the healthier path is finding a workable boundary that protects your own peace, rather than reliving the specifics constantly for anyone listening. Reasonable, grounded advice. And yet, later in that exact same episode, Ned was right back in the weeds of what happened in his marriage all over again, exhausting the same details. Every single time he claims he's moved on from it, the way he keeps circling right back suggests he really hasn't, at least not in the way he's presenting it publicly. His own comment sections have made this pretty clear too, over and over again, video after video. People have told him directly that the more respectful and humbling move at this point would be stepping back from trying to be the star of his own show altogether, getting some kind of normal job that doesn't put his family's private business on constant display, and actually being present with the people around him instead of continuously narrating his own fallout for an audience that increasingly seems tired of hearing about it. One comment that really stuck with me described a recent podcast episode as flat-out rock bottom, accusing him of essentially using a paid guest as a free therapy session dressed up as content for the algorithm. Another pointed out that fame clearly isn't for everyone, and it especially isn't suited for someone who seems to want to work through personal growth in a healthy, private way, while simultaneously broadcasting every step of that process for views. There's a real tension there that a lot of commenters have picked up on. The stated goal of healing and moving forward keeps running directly into the actual behavior of constantly reopening the same wound on camera. There is something about this situation that feels surprisingly complicated. On one hand, it's hard to ignore that he genuinely seems to love creating content. That doesn't come across as fake or manufactured. Even after everything that's happened, he still appears to enjoy making videos, telling stories, and connecting with an audience. For someone whose career and identity were built around being a creator, it's understandable why walking away completely would be incredibly difficult. Creating content clearly wasn't just a job for him. It became a huge part of who he is. Losing that overnight would leave almost anyone struggling to figure out what comes next, so it's possible to understand that side of the situation on a human level without necessarily agreeing with the choices he's making. Where a lot of viewers start losing sympathy, though, is when that passion for creating content seems tied almost entirely to revisiting the same controversy over and over again. The difficult reality is that he once had an incredibly successful career, a massive audience, financial security, and opportunities that many creators spend their entire lives chasing. None of that disappeared because of random bad luck. It disappeared because of decisions that he made himself. That's why many people have a hard time accepting the idea that he's simply a victim of circumstance. Actions have consequences, and in this case, those consequences were enormous. The bigger criticism isn't that he's still processing what happened. Everyone deals with regret differently, and no one expects someone to instantly move on from losing such a huge part of their life. The issue is that his way of coping appears to involve repeatedly bringing the entire situation back into the spotlight. Every new podcast appearance, interview, or video that circles back to the scandal doesn't just reopen old wounds for him, it also pulls everyone else connected to it back into the conversation. For the people whose lives were also affected, that can be exhausting. Instead of allowing the story to gradually fade into the past, it feels like it's constantly being restarted because it's still the topic that generates the most attention. From the perspective of many viewers, that's what begins to feel selfish. It's not the fact that he's hurting or struggling. Most people can sympathize with someone trying to rebuild after making serious mistakes. It's the sense that rebuilding his career seems to depend on revisiting an event that other people would probably rather leave behind. Every time the conversation returns, everyone connected to it is reminded of one of the most difficult periods of their lives, whether they wanted to participate in that discussion or not. At this point, it's difficult to imagine that pattern changing anytime soon. As long as those conversations continue attracting views, there's always going to be an incentive to keep returning to them. Whether that's intentional or simply the easiest content to make, the result ends up looking very similar from the outside. One person who deserves real credit throughout all of this is Ariel. Whatever private emotions she has undoubtedly experienced, she's managed to maintain a level of grace and composure that many people honestly don't think they'd be capable of under similar circumstances. She hasn't appeared interested in turning the situation into an ongoing public battle, even while it continues resurfacing again and again. That restraint has earned her a great deal of respect from people watching everything unfold. What's especially striking is how much he actually had before everything changed. He wasn't just another internet creator trying to break through. He was part of a hugely successful brand with a loyal audience, consistent projects, financial success, and opportunities that most creators only dream about. Yes, he was one member of a team rather than the sole face of the brand, but that's still an incredible position to be in. Plenty of people would gladly choose long-term stability and shared success over constantly being the center of attention. Instead, it increasingly looks like being one of four ultimately wasn't enough for him. Whether that's a fair assessment or not, that's the impression many viewers have been left with. The path he's on now has made him a solo creator, but it has also made him someone who is frequently criticized and whose biggest source of attention continues to revolve around the worst mistake of his career. Maybe, from his perspective, that's still a worthwhile trade if it allows him to stay in the spotlight and keep doing what he loves. From the outside looking in, though, it feels less like a comeback story and more like someone who can't stop reliving the chapter that cost him almost everything in the first place. That's ultimately why so many people walk away from this situation feeling more sadness than anger. That's where things currently stand with Ned. I want to know what you guys think. Do you genuinely believe he's using humor here to process something real and difficult? Or do you think he knows exactly what he's doing by keeping this story alive purely for content? Let me know your honest thoughts in the comments below. I love you guys so much, and I'll talk to you in the next video. Bye, guys.